Baby, I can't get over this sheriff shooting this judge, dude. I wouldn't ask permission. I wouldn't talk shit. I wouldn't ask you to arrest nobody. Just go handle business. You touch one of my girls, I'm fixing to change your trajectory on the planet. And that's what this sheriff did.
What did you think when the sheriff shot the judge?
A lot of the corruption was going to come out. He either knew something or something was going on that he knew about that we all might not know about, but he was doing something to protect us. There'd be girls sign themselves out and take them on home. It was sick.
The supervisors would take the inmates home for the night?
Yes.
The judge would have sex with inmates from the jail?
Yes.
And you saw it?
Yes. I was part of it. I was one of them.
The tragic slaying of Judge Kevin Mullins inside his own courthouse chambers reads like a script from the darkest corners of political drama, but the emerging details are far more sinister than any fiction writer could imagine. Sheriff Shawn "Mickey" Stines stands accused of entering those chambers and unleashing his weapon on the judge, ending the life of a man who wielded tremendous power in Letcher County. At first glance, this appears to be a shocking dispute between two powerful men that spiraled out of control. But when you begin examining the evidence, disturbing red flags emerge that transform this story from a spontaneous outburst into a complex web of secrets, betrayals, and scandals that extend far beyond a single confrontation. The first major red flag centers on Stines' assertion that he pulled the trigger because he believed he was safeguarding his wife and daughter. Consider this carefully. Here's a sheriff, a man with decades of law enforcement experience, publicly declaring that the judge represented some form of threat to his own family. This wasn't a vague statement. He specifically positioned the entire incident as an act of protection. Sources indicate this wasn't something he stammered out in panic afterward. He repeated it consistently, even during his arrest, reportedly maintaining that his family was in jeopardy. This raises countless questions. Protecting them from what precisely? Abduction? Manipulation? Something more sinister? Was this paranoia driven by rage, or did legitimate concerns fuel this claim? And if there was substance to it, why hasn't this been clearly presented in court? Why allow it to linger like a storm cloud, feeding speculation?
We got to know what led to this, Mickey. What transpired leading up to this? Because I know it just didn't happen for no reason. Something's happened.
Be fair to me.
We'll be fair to you.
Just don't beat on me.
I ain't gonna beat on you. Nobody else is gonna beat on you.
There is a lot more to the story. Allegations of a secret sex ring.
If you accept Stines' version, then Mullins was far more than just a judge presiding over cases. He was someone who had invaded the sheriff's personal world in a way that drove him to breaking point. If you reject his account, then you're confronted with the possibility that this protecting my family story is merely a desperate cover-up for premeditation. Regardless, that single assertion casts an enormous shadow over the case and forces you to question whether this was ever simply about a personal disagreement or if the truth lies buried beneath layers of fear, secrecy, and unspoken tensions. That shadow grows darker when you examine the next red flag, Judge Mullins' phone records. In the hours preceding the incident, surveillance footage and investigative testimony show that calls were placed from Mullins' phone to Sheriff Stines' daughter. Let that register. The daughter whose protection Stines claimed motivated his actions was directly connected to the judge's phone activity moments before he was slain. Was Mullins contacting her? Was Stines using Mullins' phone to make the call? Was her number stored in the judge's contacts, as some investigators initially suspected? These remain unanswered questions because, remarkably, her phone wasn't seized as evidence initially. That oversight alone generates suspicion. Why leave such a crucial piece of evidence untouched if you're committed to uncovering the truth? The situation becomes more complex. Sources reveal that these calls weren't some distant detail buried in records. They occurred just minutes before the incident itself. The timing makes dismissing them as coincidence impossible. If these calls were innocent, why do they sit at the center of the timeline? And if they weren't innocent, what exactly was being discussed or revealed in those final moments that could have triggered such a violent response? Every angle leads back to that unexplained phone connection. The situation becomes more troubling when you factor in reports that Mullins and Stines shared lunch together earlier that day, with Mullins allegedly suggesting they needed a private meeting afterward. They returned to Mullins' chambers together, and within minutes the violence erupted, directly following those mysterious calls. This feels less like coincidence and more like a sequence of events triggered by something that phone log revealed. Were there inappropriate communications between the judge and the sheriff's daughter? Was there an actual relationship developing, or was this all being twisted into a betrayal narrative that pushed Stines over the edge? Sources whisper that this call log represents the explosive element in the entire case, one that could shift public sympathy dramatically depending on what's discovered. Until forensic results emerge, speculation continues mounting, and the fact that both Mullins and Stines' phones were sent for analysis only intensifies the sense that there's a digital trail waiting to detonate. The longer those results remain hidden, the more people question whether the delay involves careful processing or something more calculated. After all, phones don't just contain numbers and call logs, they store messages, deleted texts, voicemails, and evidence that might reveal the true tone and context behind those calls. If the content confirms suspicions, it could completely alter this case's narrative, but if it doesn't, then why was Stines so convinced his daughter was endangered? Either outcome leaves disturbing questions about how personal this confrontation truly was. If all this wasn't complicated enough, another red flag drags this case into even darker territory: the allegations of misconduct. A woman recently stepped forward claiming that Judge Mullins wasn't simply presiding over justice from the bench, he was allegedly operating the courthouse like a house of ill repute. According to her testimony, women under house arrest were coerced into a twisted arrangement where they were pressured into intimate acts in exchange for leniency, better treatment, or even avoiding prison time. She describes a courtroom where power wasn't about law, it was about exploitation. Even more disturbing, she suggested there were recordings, videotaped encounters in Mullins' chambers involving not just him, but deputies and other higher-ups engaging in the same predatory behavior. If true, this wasn't one corrupt judge abusing his position. It was a network of misconduct embedded within the system. According to her description, this wasn't whispered rumors or isolated incidents. It sounded like a culture that had become normalized, where authority figures treated the courthouse as their private domain. The very institution meant to uphold justice was allegedly transformed into a stage for corruption and degradation. These allegations don't just tarnish Mullins' reputation, they call an entire institution into question. If recordings truly exist, they could expose a scandal far larger than one man's misconduct, and if others in power knew or participated, it could explain why so many seemed willing to ignore it until it exploded in violence.
The judge would have sex with inmates from the jail.
Yes.
And you saw it.
Yes. I was part of it. I was one of them.
How did they keep it a secret?
It wasn't a secret.
Why did you feel like you had to have sex with the judge?
Because he's the one with the power. He holds my entire life in his hands. Not just from being in jail, like coming in off the street and seeing him. He's the one that makes the decisions over whether I get to keep my children or not. He's the one that makes the decisions on whether I go to jail.
Now, consider how this connects to Stines. He wasn't just Mullins' professional colleague. They had been friends for decades. He also supervised deputies who were implicated in scandals involving criminal behavior and misconduct with inmates. When the victim making these courthouse allegations came forward, it was against one of Stines' former deputies, who was ultimately convicted of assault and related charges. But the allegations didn't stop with the deputy. They circled back to Judge Mullins' chambers. If you imagine Stines' position being deposed in a case connected to all this just 3 days before the incident, you can picture the pressure building. Did he know something that made him fear his family was being drawn into that mess? Was he terrified of secrets emerging that could destroy his career, his family, or his reputation? Or did Mullins actually cross a line involving his daughter, driving Stines into a rage that ended in bloodshed? What's remarkable is how these red flags aren't isolated, they're interconnected. The claim about protecting his daughter doesn't exist in isolation once you realize her number appears in the judge's phone records. The allegations of courthouse misconduct don't stand alone when you consider that powerful men in that very courthouse were reportedly implicated. It's nearly impossible to examine these details and believe this was simply a heated argument that escalated out of control in a 10-second surveillance clip. Instead, you begin to see the framework of something much larger.
Did the judge ever say, you have to do this, or if you do this,
You come see me 3 times and we'll take care of this. Come visit me a few times, we'll take care of it.
He would say that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And how many women do you think were also doing this?
Total over the years, hundreds.
Was the incident the culmination of a personal betrayal? Was it an act of desperation by a man trapped in a scandal too massive to contain? Or was it, as some quietly suggest, the explosion of a secret conflict between 2 men who knew too much about each other's dark secrets? Judge Mullins is no longer here to respond to the allegations against him, which leaves a haunting silence over every claim that surfaces. Sheriff Stines, meanwhile, faces the possibility of life imprisonment or even capital punishment, maintaining his not guilty plea. Between them lies a community left devastated, with insiders murmuring that everyone knew there were fractures in the courthouse long before this incident, and now those fractures are splitting wide open for the world to witness. The story of Judge Mullins' tragic end isn't just about one weapon, one sheriff, or one judge. It's about the glaring red flags that, when assembled, create a chilling picture of power abuse, entangled lives, and a courthouse that may have been concealing one of the darkest secrets imaginable. And if this is only what's emerging now, the question everyone should be asking is, what else remains buried beneath the surface, waiting to be exposed? That's all for this video. See you next time.